The videotape opened on an ordinary-looking room. Neutral walls, a couch, a small table. It could have been any middle-class home in Ontario in the early 1990s, but the investigators watching knew immediately that nothing about it was normal. A young woman sat in the frame, clearly drugged, her voice slow and uncertain. Off-camera, a man spoke to her in a calm, controlled tone, giving instructions. A blonde woman moved in and out of view, adjusting the victim, checking the camera, acting as if they were filming something routine. The casual way they handled her made it worse. What looked like an everyday house in Port Dalhousie had become the setting for recorded crimes. By the time those tapes were played in court, Canada already knew the names Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. The tabloids called them the Ken and Barbie Killers because of their looks. Paul was a smooth-talking salesman with boy-next-door features and a rehearsed charm. Karla was a veterinary assistant with long blonde hair and a bright smile. In photographs, they looked like an ideal young couple on their way to a picture-perfect life. Underneath that surface, they were partners in a series of assaults and murders that had begun years before anyone connected their faces to those crimes. Paul Bernardo grew up in Scarborough, a suburb of Toronto. People who met him in school or at work often described him as confident, outgoing, and quick with a joke. But those close to him also saw flashes of cruelty and control. In the late 1980s, Scarborough was shaken by a string of assaults on young women. Victims were followed from bus stops, grabbed near their homes or along paths, and sexually assaulted. The attacker was described repeatedly as young, clean-cut, and self-assured. Police linked the cases through victim statements and physical evidence. The unknown offender became known as the Scarborough Rapist, and women changed their routines out of fear. For years, he stayed ahead of investigators. In 1987, Paul met 17-year-old Karla Homolka at a hotel restaurant in Scarborough. The attraction was immediate. Karla was drawn to his intensity and confidence. Paul found someone who not only tolerated his darker fantasies, but seemed willing to go along with them. Their relationship turned quickly controlling. He criticized her, set boundaries that suited him, and pushed sexual limits. Karla, eager to keep him, adjusted herself to what he wanted. To family and friends, they looked like a normal young couple planning a future. In private, the imbalance of power grew, and he began to involve her in his predatory behavior. Bernardo's fixation on teenage girls escalated. He talked openly about his interest in younger girls and watched them near schools and bus stops. He also focused on Karla's younger sister, Tammy, who was still in high school. Karla knew about his attention. Instead of cutting him off or warning her family, she tried to hold on to him, even if that meant allowing him more access to Tammy. On Christmas Eve 1990, at Karla's family home in St. Catharines, that obsession turned into something deadly. Paul and Karla gave Tammy drinks spiked with a powerful sedative taken from the veterinary clinic where Karla worked. In the basement, while her parents slept upstairs, they sexually assaulted Tammy and recorded parts of it on video. The drug mixture caused her to vomit and choke. When she stopped breathing, they panicked, tried to clean up the scene, dressed her, and called for help. Paramedics could not revive her. Tammy was pronounced dead. The official conclusion was that she had choked while intoxicated. No one suspected that her sister and future brother-in-law had caused her death. After Tammy's death, Paul and Karla did not pull back. They moved into a small pink clapboard house on Bayview Drive in Port Dalhousie, near St. Catharines. The house looked harmless from the street, with a neat yard and a picture window. Inside, it became their base of operations. Paul was now on the radar of Toronto investigators as a possible suspect in the Scarborough assaults and had provided a voluntary DNA sample in 1990, but the test sat unprocessed in a backlog at the lab. While that sample waited, Bernardo escalated. In June 1991, 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey disappeared from her neighborhood in Burlington. She had been locked out of her house late at night and was last seen near her home. Paul encountered her near his car and offered help. He took her back to the Bayview Drive house where he and Karla kept her for about 24 hours. During that time, they repeatedly sexually assaulted her and filmed parts of the abuse. The tapes later showed a deliberate, detached cruelty that stunned those who had to review them. When they were finished, Leslie was killed. Her body was dismembered, placed in blocks of concrete, and dumped in a nearby lake. Those blocks were discovered days later by boaters, setting off an intense but initially unfocused murder investigation. 7 months later, in April 1992, 15-year-old Kristen French was walking home from school in St. Catharines when Paul and Karla targeted her. They pulled into a church parking lot, and Karla got out holding a map, asking for directions. When Kristen came closer to help, Paul grabbed her and forced her into the car. Witnesses saw the struggle, but could not intervene in time. For 3 days, Kristen was held in their home, repeatedly assaulted while they videotaped her. Unlike Leslie, she was kept conscious and aware of what was happening. On the recordings, she tried to talk to them about her family, hoping to reach any remaining sense of conscience. It did not change the outcome. She was murdered, and her body was left in a rural ditch near a road in Niagara. The abduction and killing of Kristen French immediately drew heavy attention. Police built a detailed timeline, took witness statements from the church parking lot, and connected her case with the earlier discovery of Leslie Mahaffey's remains. At the same time, the Scarborough file remained open in Toronto. DNA testing had advanced, and old samples were being re-examined. In late 1992, the lab finally processed Paul Bernardo's sample and matched it to multiple Scarborough assaults. Investigators now had his name attached to 2 different sets of crimes. While this was happening, Paul's control over Karla began to fracture. The relationship had become more openly violent. Friends and co-workers saw bruises on her arms and face. In early 1993, a severe beating sent her to a hospital. That assault became a turning point. Karla left him and moved back in with her family. It also gave police a clearer view that violence inside the relationship might be connected to the murders they were investigating. On February 17, 1993, police arrested Paul Bernardo in connection with the Scarborough assaults. At the same time, they searched the Bayview Drive house for any evidence linking him to Leslie and Kristen. They collected clothing, receipts, and physical samples, but the most damning evidence, the videotapes, remained hidden above a ceiling light fixture in the bathroom, wrapped and pushed out of easy view. Karla understood that investigators were closing in. She hired a lawyer and began to talk. She presented herself as a battered spouse forced into crimes by an abusive partner. As part of negotiations with the Crown, she agreed to plead guilty to manslaughter in connection with the deaths of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, and to admit her role in the fatal assault on Tammy in exchange for a 12-year sentence and her testimony against Paul. In May 1993, Bernardo's former lawyer surrendered the hidden tapes to prosecutors. By then, the plea agreement with Karla had already been signed. When investigators and prosecutors watched the recordings, they saw a dynamic very different from the one Karla had described. She appeared on camera not as a helpless bystander but as an active participant. She was present for key assaults, sometimes giving directions or speaking casually while the victims were being abused. The tapes confirmed Paul Bernardo as the driving force and principal aggressor, but they also showed that Karla had agency and involvement throughout. The deal could not be undone. Public anger grew as details emerged, and the phrase, "deal with the devil," became a common description of her plea. In 1995, Paul Bernardo went on trial for the murders of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, and for multiple aggravated sexual assaults tied to the Scarborough cases. The courtroom was tightly controlled. Portions of the videotapes were played for the jury under strict conditions, with only essential segments shown to minimize additional harm to the families. Karla took the stand and described the abductions, the assaults, and the attempts to conceal the bodies. Her testimony, combined with the physical evidence and the DNA matches, left little doubt. Bernardo was convicted on all major counts and received a life sentence with no realistic prospect of release under Canadian law. Karla served her 12-year sentence in a federal institution. Her release in 2005 came with conditions and intense media scrutiny. Wherever she tried to live, communities reacted strongly, and the families of Leslie, Kristen, and Tammy continued to speak out about the gap between her role in the crimes and the sentence she served. For them, no legal outcome could match what had been taken from their daughters and sisters. In the end, the case of Bernardo and Karla Homolka showed how two people who looked completely ordinary could hide extreme violence behind the front of a normal relationship and a neat suburban house. The tapes they made and the lives they destroyed became some of the most disturbing evidence Canadian investigators had ever handled, and they left a lasting mark on how the country thought about danger, justice, and the limits of what anyone can see from the outside. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.